Aniket Nagle. I'm a PhD student at the Sensory Motor Systems Lab at ETH Zurich in Switzerland. So my background is in computer science, but at the present moment I'm working in serious games, and especially serious games for cognitive rehabilitation. So what I'm going to talk today is about a project that's going on in our lab, where we are trying to understand how to make serious games more enjoyable. So I'll start. So serious games for cognitive rehabilitation. This is a major need because due to the shifting demographic of the population, whether we're getting here, cognitive decline due to old age or cognitive impairments is now a major problem. There are more and more people who are old and they are suffering from cognitive decline, and it has been actually known that serious games which train cognitive functions can help. So serious games are capable of cognitive rehabilitation. However, it's also known that serious games need to be enjoyable. And the reason for that is the training effects of serious games. So how well they train cognitive functions depends on how much users actually enjoy when playing the games. And that's rather intuitive. So the more you enjoy, the more you will sort of get more from the game. And also, besides increasing training effect in one session, if a game is enjoyable, users feel compelled to come back and play the game again. So what we are studying presently is how to make serious games more enjoyable. And I'm going to give you a brief, one of the methods, one of the famous method or popular methods that have been used to do this, and it's based on the theory of flow. Now the theory of flow says that so while doing a task, if you keep users in this flow channel where you have to match the challenge of the task with how well the user performs. So the user skill, the user will enjoy, he will remain in this flow channel. So you can see, for example, that if a user has high skill, and if you don't present him with a high challenge, he'll be bored. However, if the user has low skill, and if you really immediately present him with a high challenge, he'll get anxious. So the flow channel says that you have to sort of maintain this balance between keeping the user bored and anxious. You have to keep him in the flow channel. And the way it's done is through difficulty adaptation. So what you do is you match difficulty to user performance. So if the user is performing well, you increase difficulty. If the user starts performing not so well, you decrease difficulty. And this is hypothesized to lead to the user being in a flow channel, which can increase user enjoyment. So this sort of pipeline starts from performance. It sort of aims to maximize performance, which can then lead to increased enjoyment. What we thought of is there is an alternate method to sustaining enjoyment, which is you give. So this is really, in this kind of thing, the game automatically changes difficulty for the user. One more method is to give users control of difficulty. And this is actually more than the preset difficulty levels that you typically find in games, easy, medium, hard. No, you actually give them the control at a high granularity, at a really high degree of granularity. What this can do is, this can lead to an increased sense of autonomy and enjoyment in the users, which can lead to increased performance. And this is based on the self-determination theory. So why we are focusing on performance and enjoyment is it's clear that serious games need to be enjoyable, but serious games really do have a task, they do have a purpose. So we also want users to perform well. We want users to really play the game longer and play it at a sort of at a difficulty level that they train themselves. So enjoyment and performance are the two things that we want. So we did a recent study in which we wanted to compare the effect of difficulty adaptation being done by the game itself which we called the task-guided adaptation, since it was the task that was guiding the adaptation, versus giving users the control of adaptation, which we call user-guided adaptation. Now, the serious game that we used was a really simple game. It was a game for memory training, which is one of the functions that is used in cognitive rehab. This is a screenshot of the game. In this game, participants played on a computer in our lab. There was a virtual living room with various objects placed around the room and various location numbers. So you can see on the top 7 and 8. And the task that they had to do was they had to memorize a list of object name and location number, move around the room, pick up an object, and keep it at the location that was given in the list. After they had finished all the objects in a list, a new round was started, and they actually won virtual cash based on how many objects they picked. I'll come to this in a moment. So this is a really, really simple task for memory training. And the elements that we adapted were, so there are two things here. The number of objects, obviously if there are more objects, it gets more difficult. And also the list that they had to memorize, they could not see it, so they could only see it for a certain number of times, and those number of times also formed part of the difficulty. So these two elements, number of objects and number of times this can be viewed, were the difficulty parameters. So the general way that the game functioned was, user has a certain number of objects to memorize and a certain number of times the list can be viewed, N and L. And when user has moved around the room, picked up all the objects, kept them at the location, a new round was started. And this was done in 3 ways. In the task-guided adaptation, the game changed the values of N and L itself automatically based on user performance. And we used really the simplest algorithm. So we just said that if the user can complete a round, then you increase difficulty by increasing N and decreasing L. And if the user has to restart a round, that means if he cannot complete the round at that difficulty level, you decrease difficulty. You decrease N and increase L, which decreases difficulty. In the user-guided mode, after each round, the game displayed the formula with which it gave virtual cache to the user, which was a function of number of objects and number of times this can be viewed. And the game actually asked users for values of N and L. So you'll notice that this is a bit different from preset difficulty levels. So it's not really easy, medium, hard. Users actually had the choice, the control of setting these individual parameters. And as a baseline, we also had a third mode in which the game assigned random values to N and L. So we had 24 participants playing this game. We used a repeated measures design. All participants played in all 3 modes. And what we did was we fully randomized the order of the modes. So for example, and so we got 6 groups. So for example, a participant who was in group 2 played user-guided on day 1 for 40 minutes. On day 2, around approximately the same time of day, task-guided, and on day 3, random, for example. And the outcome measures that we were interested in is enjoyment and performance, as the title suggests. But we also recorded, so we also were interested in competence, how competent the user felt, and challenge. And these two, motivation, enjoyment, competence, and challenge, we derived this from a self-reported measure. So we gave users a sort of a questionnaire to fill in, which had 15 questions that they had to answer from a scale of 1 to 7, where 1 was strongly disagree, 7 was strongly agree. Performance was, it was really the virtual cache that they won. Since it was a function of the number of objects and the number of times list is viewed, it was the objective performance measure. And what we also noticed is that in the pilot tests that we did prior to starting a real experiment, users in the user-guided mode, they were sort of following one of 2 strategies. they were either trying to maximize cash, so with this virtual cash, they could also buy some virtual objects, which they were really interested in, or they were actually trying to maximize challenge. They were trying to challenge themselves. So we were interested in, so we asked, in user-guided mode, we asked the participants what they were doing, what they were interested in maximizing, and we were interested in how this sort of relates to how much cash they earn. And the experimental protocol was, for example, if you're in group 1, on day 1 we gave them a brief introduction, then they played the user-guided mode for 40 minutes. They answered the motivation questionnaire, enjoyment, competence, and challenge. Same thing on day 2. And on day 3, in the end, we also asked them to subjectively rank the 3 days. So, for example, they could say they enjoyed the most on day 1, the least on day 2, and not so much on day 3, for example. And I already come to the results. So here you see enjoyment values go from 1 to 7, since they could answer the questions from 1 to 7, where 1 is did not enjoy at all, and 7 is enjoyed the most. And we see that enjoyment is, and star means significant difference. Enjoyment is significantly greatest in the user-guided mode, which we sort of expected. Perceived challenge, on the other hand, is significantly greatest in the task-guided mode. And performance, as marked by cache 1, is significantly greatest in the as challenged, as in task guided. And this is interesting. So we asked so in the user guided mode, we asked the users what they were trying to do, and we categorized them into 2 kinds of users, cache seekers and challenge seekers. And we see that in user guided, actually people who were trying to maximize cache won less cache, and people who were trying to maximize challenge actually won more cash, which is interesting. In task guided, people who were trying to maximize cash did actually win more cash. So in user guided, what we saw was cash seekers, they had or they set on an average a low number of objects for themselves in every round, which led them to playing more rounds. And what we sort of gleaned from this is the people who has challenge can enjoy in the long term. So we think that this kind of hybrid mode between task guided and user guided could sustain both enjoyment and performance.